June 18th, on this day, in 618, Li Yuan, a Chinese governor, was crowned as Emperor Gaozu of Tang, founding the Tang dynasty and beginning 3 centuries of its rule over China. In 1155, Frederick I, known as Barbarossa, who was born in Germany, was crowned as Emperor of Rome, marking a significant moment in Holy Roman Empire history. In 1239, Edward I, later known as Longshanks, future King of England from 1272 to 1307, was born. In 1429, Joan of Arc led French forces against the English at the Battle of Patay, France, securing a decisive victory that turned the tide of the Hundred Years' War in favor of the French. In 1579, Sir Francis Drake claimed San Francisco Bay for England, expanding English territorial claims in the Americas during his global circumnavigation. In 1667, the Dutch fleet sailed up the Thames River and threatened London, demonstrating Dutch naval power during the Second Anglo-Dutch War. In 1775, British forces captured Bunker Hill outside of Boston after a costly battle, marking a pivotal moment early in the American Revolutionary War. In 1778, British troops evacuated Philadelphia during the American Revolutionary War, shifting the focus of military operations elsewhere. In 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte incorporated Italy into his empire, further expanding French territory during his rise to power. In 1812, the War of 1812 began as the United States declared war against Britain, leading to significant conflicts between the two nations. In 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte suffered a decisive defeat at the Battle of Waterloo, as British forces led by the Duke of Wellington and Prussian troops under Field Marshal von Blücher overcame the French army. This battle ended over 2 decades of conflict in Europe, and marked Napoleon's final loss before his exile to St. Helena. In 1848, Austrian General Alfred Windisch-Gratz crushed a Czech uprising in Prague, demonstrating the Habsburg response to nationalist movements during Europe's Year of Revolutions. In 1854, the Red Turban Revolt began in Guangdong, China, signaling growing unrest under the Qing dynasty and rising rebellion movements in southern China. In 1856, the Republican Party opened its first national convention in Philadelphia, marking the formal establishment of a major American political party. In 1858, Henrik Ibsen, the Norwegian modernist playwright known for works such as A Doll's House, married Susanna Thorsen in Oslo. In 1861, President Abraham Lincoln witnessed Dr. Thaddeus Lowe demonstrate the use of a hot air balloon for military reconnaissance, paving the way for aerial observation during the Civil War. In 1873, American suffragist Susan B. Anthony was fined after being convicted for voting in the 1872 presidential election. She refused to pay the fine, making a powerful statement for women's rights. Over a century later, President Donald Trump issued a posthumous pardon, a move that generated debate about the suffrage movement's legacy. In 1876, General George Crook's command was attacked and defeated on the Rosebud River by approximately 1,500 Sioux and Cheyenne warriors, led by Crazy Horse during the Great Sioux War. In 1886, British explorer and mountaineer George Mallory was born in Mobberley, Cheshire. His disappearance on Mount Everest in 1924 later became one of the 20th century's most enduring mysteries. In 1928, American aviator Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean as a passenger, landing at Buryport, Wales, and paving the way for future achievements in aviation. In 1930, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act became law in the United States, imposing the highest tariffs on imports in the nation's history and contributing to global economic tensions during the Great Depression. In 1936, mobster Charles "Lucky" Luciano was convicted on 62 counts of compulsory prostitution, dealing a significant blow to organized crime in the United States. In 1940, following the evacuation of Allied forces from Dunkirk and the fall of France, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill delivered his famous "This was their finest hour" speech to the House of Commons, urging perseverance in the face of adversity. In 1940, broadcasting from London after France fell to Nazi Germany, French General Charles de Gaulle called on his compatriots to continue resisting under his leadership. This appeal marked the beginning of the French resistance. In 1940, the Soviet Union occupied the Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, dramatically redrawing the map of Eastern Europe during the early years of World War II. In 1948, Columbia Records introduced the 33 1/3 revolutions per minute microgroove vinyl long-playing record, commonly known as the LP. This innovation became the standard music medium, allowing about 20 minutes of playtime per side. In 1950, surgeon Richard Lawler performed the world's first successful kidney transplant operation in Chicago, marking a major advance in medical science. In 1953, South Korean President Syngman Rhee released Korean prisoners of war who did not wish to be repatriated, an act that defied the United Nations and complicated armistice negotiations during the Korean War. In 1959, a federal court annulled the Arkansas law that allowed public schools to close in order to prevent racial integration, further advancing the civil rights movement in the United States. In 1963, the United States Supreme Court ruled that public schools could not require the reading of the Lord's Prayer or Bible passages, reinforcing the separation of church and state. In 1966, Samuel Nobritt became the first African American appointed to the United States Atomic Energy Commission, marking an important step in diversifying high-level scientific leadership. In 1969, the film The Wild Bunch, directed by Sam Peckinpah and starring William Holden and Ernest Borgnine, was released, becoming notable for its innovative style and graphic depiction of violence. In 1970, North Vietnamese troops cut the last operating rail line in Cambodia, further isolating the region during the Vietnam War. In 1972, 118 people died in the Staines air disaster when a Hawker Siddeley Trident aircraft entered a deep stall and crashed shortly after takeoff from London Heathrow Airport. In 1972, 5 men were arrested for breaking into the Democratic Party headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C., an event that triggered the Watergate scandal and ultimately led to President Richard Nixon's resignation. In 1979, the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks II agreement, known as SALT II, was signed by United States President Jimmy Carter and Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev, marking a significant step in limiting nuclear arms during the Cold War. In 1983, astronaut Sally Ride became the first American woman to travel into outer space, launching with 4 other crew members aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger and inspiring future generations. In 1994, millions of Americans watched as former football player O.J. Simpson, facing murder charges, drove his Ford Bronco through Los Angeles while being pursued by police in a televised slow-speed chase. In 1995, New Zealand rugby player Jonah Lomu scored a memorable try during the Rugby World Cup, famously running over England's Mike Catt in New Zealand's 45-29 victory. In 2006, Catherine Jefferts Schori was elected presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church in the United States, becoming the first woman to lead an entire church province within the Anglican Communion's 400-year history. In 2023, the experimental submersible Titan imploded during a dive to the wreck of the Titanic, resulting in the deaths of all 5 people on board and drawing international attention to the risks of deep-sea exploration.
Subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's events.